I'm interviewing Farley Wollert from Nimlok, Kentucky. We've recently been through our Sound of Clarity engagement, and Farley, I wanted to talk to you a little bit just to find out what your experience was. Could you tell us a little bit, starting with what problems Nimlok was encountering that led you all to reach out to us?
Well, I think the sort of defining moment that led us to you was we had been struggling with a lot of internal turmoil everywhere from people interaction and processes, and we just really did not have our act together. And then we started looking towards bringing in some outside marketing help to get us bringing in more sales, bigger clients. And in the process of interviewing with that company and getting feedback from employees, sort of defining where we thought we could go or what we were capable of, I think all of us that were interviewed gave a pretty candid, real life version of how things were here, and let those people know that a lot of us were not confident that we could handle the additional load of business that the owners were seeking to venture into. And then after that assessment, I think they went back to the owners and said, I don't know if you really can handle what we could do for you right now. And I think that was a big eye-opener for them, because I don't necessarily think they liked hearing that they weren't a fit that way. Usually it's the other way around, right? Mm-hmm. As a result, I think that was sort of a very, very, very big eye-opener for the owners, and sort of functioned as the catalyst for them to seek actual help outside. Let's be really serious about this and see what we can do to fix all this. I think some things they were aware of, didn't know how to deal with them, didn't know how to fix them. There was probably a lot of other things that they may have just been completely oblivious to.
In those interviews, what sort of problems were you all describing?
A lot of what we described was just our complete and total lack of coordination across departments, across people. We had sort of developed with some departments a very us versus them mentality. A lot of cover your own butt. Don't worry about doing what's right. Just do what's written down, because it's their problem if it's wrong. That kind of a thing. Not a lot of accountability. And it was just a perfect storm of terror here. It was just nothing went well. It was nothing but reprints, redos, doing everything multiple times, a whole lot of overtime to do that, and then all the jobs that got pushed because you were redoing things 2 and 3 times, all those jobs were being late, and then there was a lot of haste and a lot of mistakes. So then you're redoing those jobs, and we were just in this snowball where I was sitting there thinking, we're actually getting worse, and now we're talking about getting some big clients in here when we can't even take care of the ones that we have. And that's where we were at. So there was an impact financially to the company and to clients? Yes. Our theme here had always been that we want to under-promise and over-deliver. Tell them we'll have it ready this date, but we'll get it to them a couple days early. And we were like the opposite of that. Everything was, we were calling them and they were late, or we weren't even calling them to tell them it was late, and they would just show up and it's not ready, or we have people not showing up for installations. And we just looked really, really, really not good at what we do. That's really what it was. And then to take that scenario of honestly what I said was, we're not good at what we do, and then try to go to big clients that you want to keep and retain for a long time. And I'm just thinking, we're going to go in and we're going to blow it on the first thing that we do for them, and then they're just going to write us off. Don't use that company anymore. So what was the impact on that for you as an employee? For me, I started viewing it as I kept saying we're broken and we're spiraling and we're getting worse. And I was looking at it as we fumble a few more and some of our key clients that we already have, and we lose some of those big clients, and more than half of us aren't going to be working here anymore. So I was already at a point where I was weighing out my exit strategy. That's what I was doing. I was trying to figure out what can I do to get out of here, because I don't think they will ever fix the problems that they have. And that was where I was completely bottomed out, total sense of hopelessness, as far as I had struggled for a couple of years trying to get things moving, help with this, get involved with these other departments that I had nothing to do with, just to try to get things streamlined and organized and people communicating better. And I just wasn't getting a lot of support as far as things that we would put in place and reinforcing those from above to make sure that those procedures or policies were backed up and, you know, supported, and repercussions for people that involved. I just didn't have any way to do that. And so everything that I tried to do might work for a couple of weeks, but there'd be no longevity to it. Nobody was committed to it. And then you'd, one by one, things that you would work on would just kind of fizzle out. And I just got to the point where I was like, I'm just not putting myself through this anymore if I'm just going to constantly be blown off or written off if I go say, this is a problem and I don't think we're acknowledging it. And what are we going to do? Well, and there was just a lot of lack of wanting to deal with things that were just tough things to deal with. And so I just kind of reached a point where I said, that's it. I just think this is something that just isn't fixable. So I started looking at, and I've been here 11, 12 years or something like that. Favorite place I've ever worked, but again, these flaws have been around for a long time. And as we've gotten to be bigger and busier and more clients, all these problems were starting to really become more apparent and obvious, and things were more chaotic, and more deadlines missed and that type of thing. So I was looking at it as it's just a matter of time before we really blow a big client's job or something, and we're going to lose a big chunk of our, you know, income.
And from my perspective, working with you all, you are sort of the spirit of the company. And
Right.
so I would guess you checking out,
Yes.
emotionally checking out,
Yeah.
had a morale impact elsewhere throughout the company.
Yes. Yeah, and I think I was always the, come on guys, we can, you know, that guy. And trying to be diplomatic between people that I knew didn't function well together. I think I was always trying to keep people not taking their interactions with each other at such a serious level, and quit thinking that everybody's out to get everybody. And so, yeah, somehow over the years, had just sort of achieved this sort of company cheerleader kind of, you know, I was, you know, if Joe and Don needed something specifically pushed forward, I was kind of the guy that they didn't necessarily ask me to do it. I would just do it because I knew it needed to be done. It wasn't always what I wanted to do sometimes, but then for some of it, it was just fun stuff, and it was just a way to, you know, I'd see this buildup of people getting angry with each other, and then it's like, okay, you know what, we just need to do a cookout and do something stupid or ridiculous here and get everybody to quit taking each other so seriously. And so that's what I would do. And I think we got really busy, and we got to the point to where it was becoming where we couldn't have some of these sort of impromptu quick gatherings that we used to do. And not having the ability to do that anymore, it became more of a sort of a frontline one-on-one kind of thing that I was doing. And it was straining because I had my own design work that I was supposed to be doing. And I was spending a lot of time going to other departments and trying to figure out, well, what is it that you're upset about? And what is it that, and I think it just kind of took its toll after a while, because it had sort of shifted as far as what my role in that was. And it just seemed like because we were getting worse as a company, it was getting harder to, come on guys, and get everybody back together. So you just kind of, it's like you're letting out line on something that you know you're not going to be able to pull it back in. Mm-hmm. So you let a little go, and you're like, I don't like that, but that's what I have to do right now. Mm-hmm. And then you realize that's now gone for good. You're not going to get that back. And so we just kind of watched all that. And I think as I disconnected from everything and sort of said, you know what, I don't have any more energy to invest in all this. I think it just sort of, the less I would do of that, the more I would see this discontent amongst people sort of reform. That was sort of like cartilage between bone or something like that, you know.
So you came into the process discouraged,
Yes.
basically hopeless.
Yes.
So tell us a little of your experience through the whole process.
We had a phrase that we tossed around a lot here, which was what we called flavor of the week, which was in good nature. There were many times that the owners would, you know, make an effort to put something forth or get people involved towards something that might solve a particular problem. And again, we would initiate it, and there would be no follow-through collectively and by the owners themselves. It wasn't on their plate anymore, so they weren't really concerned about it unless a problem affected them or one of their clients directly. It was just sort of not an issue. And so when other people are very passionate about a particular thing that they feel is a struggle that's not being recognized or acknowledged from above, and you get this, you know, this morale and this checkout that a lot of people were doing. And myself being one of those, because I think that's what I got to, was the point of saying how many more times do I go tell them the same problem and we don't do anything about it. So my concern is that as we went into this process, I guess once we got involved with you, and they kind of told us, you know, we're going to have this person who's going to come in, and, you know, we're going to do some retreats, and we're going to get rid of, you know, the politics in the business. And I'm thinking that would be marvelous. I just don't think it's possible, given the fact that we had a lot of big personalities and a lot of conflicting personalities. So yes, when I sat down in my initial meeting with you, I came in not to be rude about it or anything, was totally willing to hear what you had to say, but when I walked in the door, my skepticism was just way up there, because we had, again, I'm looking at it as I am now conditioned to think that this is something that we will pursue for a few weeks, maybe a month, and then it fizzles out as we get stuck with other issues that pop up in the company. And so that was my mentality coming into that meeting. So.
Did it stay?
No. And the thing is that as all along, I always was of the belief that one of our biggest problems was people just not directly dealing with each other in a constructive way to solve problems. It was always talking about that person when they're not there and talk about what they're doing wrong, and it was just people going to this person, going to this person, and going to this person. And all along I was just like, if people would just deal with it directly, you know, one-on-one, we wouldn't have a lot of this stuff. And I think what I really wanted to see was some way for the owners to recognize where they were part of the problem, which in some cases I think they realized that they were, and I think in other cases I don't think they realized that they were contributing to some of the disconnect between people and our inability to kind of solidify processes and things like that, because we would put rules in place and they would publicly say, yeah, that's a good idea, but then not necessarily follow that rule themselves, which again created a lot of discontent. So I think what I came out of that initial meeting feeling like was, okay, well, if this is something that is going to get people to communicate directly and not make it so personal and more about processes and things like that and fixing those, constructively and collectively, and with knowing that we had the retreats coming up and how it was going to sort of start with the team group and then filter out to everyone else progressively, as opposed to just a big, hello everybody, we're just all starting this thing right now together, and seeing how that strategy played out, then I was thinking, if everybody does this will work great. If everybody can put the personal issues that they had aside and look at everything, as a team. We just weren't functioning as a team. Then I thought, okay, this is hope inspiring. This is making me think this, we'll go to this retreat and I'm feeling good about this retreat. Hearing some of the things that might go down at the retreat were really exciting to me, because it was actually stuff that I knew wasn't going to be fun, but I was excited for the fact that we were just going to put it all out on the table, because that's kind of the way I would prefer to do it anyway. So recognizing that there was going to be some opportunity to bring some things out into the open that really, for a long time, it needed to be discussed, and look at how we were collectively solving problems, and how upper management was either supporting or not supporting the things that we were trying to push forward. I thought, this is exactly what needs to happen. So let's see if it actually happens. And that's where I was up until the retreat. And up until the retreat, just after the one-on-one meeting, I was already starting to formulate in my head a lot of things that I definitely wanted to bring up in that setting, to make sure that we were covering some of those things that maybe some people wouldn't want to talk about or bring up. And that's one thing that I certainly don't mind doing is, here guys, we have to talk about it, and then letting it just be out. Because once it's out, what people half the time figure out is it's not that uncomfortable to actually talk about it. So, and I'd already done that with some people, and so I was more open to it, and probably maybe than some that were a little more afraid. The idea of being open and honest with everybody, that didn't really scare me. What scared me more was how will the different personalities that were in the group, I was maybe assessing, like, I think this guy will probably absorb this well. This person may not be so receptive. Like, that was kind of the play out I was doing prior to going in. I was kind of trying to figure out, like, who's going to get on board with this and stay on board with it, and who's going to continue to be an issue. And then as it turned out, there really weren't any issues after the retreat.
So after the retreat, what did things look like?
After the retreat, I think what I saw was restraint from people, because their self-awareness was much higher coming out of that meeting. And so what we sort of had in the initial week or so after that was a lot of people catching themselves. It was all still fresh in their minds, some of the things that they had picked up in the retreat, things that we had talked about, things that we had discussed. And this is more of just the self-disciplinary part of it, the catching yourself when you're about to triangulate or something like that. And it was interesting, because I think everybody came out of that retreat just overwhelmingly excited about putting all this in place and watching how it would affect everyone. And looking at the strategic aspect of it, of how this wasn't just a comeback with trumpets and fanfare and just, here's everything we learned over the weekend. It wasn't like that at all. There was a little bit of mystery to it as far as all the other people, because we didn't come back and just unload everything that we'd learned over the weekend. What we did was we came back and we started practicing what we had learned over the weekend. And in doing so, we really immediately saw some more loud, boisterous personalities sort of take heed that there was sort of a new approach to everything. And immediately, I think it sort of made them recognize where they were sort of blowing a lot of hot air, being difficult in moments when they didn't need to be difficult, because we were all taking this sort of more restrained approach as far as how we would talk to everyone, how we would deal with everyone, and just trying to lead by the example, so that this would sort of filter into their brain without them maybe even realizing that, that these were things we were teaching them without them realizing that they were being taught. We were just strictly leading by example.
Does restrained mean suppressing?
No, restrained just means having enough self-awareness to recognize and think about what you're saying, and making sure that you're doing it in a way that follows ground rules, and sort of puts the greater good as the focus, and leaving some of the personal, high pedestal feelings and statements at the door, and coming down to other people's level. And even though coming back it was a little rough initially, because sometimes you're taking that approach with them and they're still high on the hill, and it just took time on a few people to sort of steer them back in the direction. This is all prior to them ever knowing anything about what we had talked about or learned over that retreat. So, but I think one of the things too is that because we changed our approach, and our approach became even more, seeking out what their, pains were, what their issues were, what their valid needs were. And in doing that, I think that sort of pacified a lot of people that were big and upset about stuff, because they realized that they were being, somebody was listening and somebody was interested in knowing what it was that actually was bothering them, so that they didn't feel like their concerns were not being validated in some kind of way. And then immediately taking some kind of, action, or, let's just take this problem and let's just solve this and do something about it right away, instead of just talking about doing it for a long time.
So what's been the company impact then overall since?
I think that the decrease in triangulation and discontent across people and departments has been staggeringly, just blow your mind, improved. And I think between what we did between the retreat and when we actually sort of brought the rest of the people into what we were doing, I think that got everybody on the same page. And I think with rare exception, and almost any time somebody blows it on one of the kind of central, ground rules that we would follow, the thing that's really neat is that if people aren't catching it right away, that they've like, oh wait, hang on, let me rethink how I'm going to say that, phrase that, whatever, because of how we define what sort of is following the rules and what isn't following the rules, it's very easy to call someone out when they're not following those rules without it really being personal. And people's receptivity to being told, like, hey, you're kind of hitting us really high up on this. Is there any way we can? And people are kind of like, yeah, I'm totally doing that. And it's that self-awareness that's what I really thought was impossible. I really thought that was impossible. And it's pretty wild now watching how every little meeting that we have or interaction that we have, there's this way higher level of universal respect for one another, even if we don't always have the same exact opinion of what we think the solution is. But the way that we're sort of working our way through a lot of those, differences of opinion, or I'm kind of thinking this is the way we should do that, but it's just so much more peaceful. That's a big word, peaceful. Things seem a lot more peaceful here.
Has it had financial or client satisfaction impact?
Yeah. You would think that would be something, in the short term that would be hard to quantify. But because we've had a guy that we've put into a position where these are the types of things that he watches, and he tries to coordinate the departments to make sure that our production is moving along efficiently, not only have we improved our achieving of deadlines, and have already started talking about adding additional days into our timeline so that things are getting done 2 days in advance of a deadline rather than 1 day. We've also been looking at the numbers, the waste numbers over the last 2 months. And they went from just hit you in the gut, terrible numbers when we started. And literally, I just got an email from the guy that does all this calculating, who's out of town, but he had sent an email out before he left town and said, our numbers for this week show that we had 0 this last week. And we have to look at a couple things, and there might be a few things that we have to tack onto that week because we don't get billing for a particular shipping item or something for the next week. But it's still mind-blowing. It's, even when, if we're really busy time of year or kind of slow time of year, our waste percentage still kind of tends to be about the same, even though we're not as busy in these moments. And end of December isn't typically a super busy time, but our last 2 years, our Decembers have been really busy. And years before that, that wasn't necessarily the case. So we're definitely doing more work in the month of December and January than we used to. And yeah, I was blown away because we've already been having our weekly meetings and talking about waste reduction and all that. It was our big goal, and we're seeing it. I mean, we're seeing the numbers come down, and I think that, the owners are ecstatic about that. We're all ecstatic about it. And probably the people that aren't having to work as long hours to get it all done because they're not having to do it twice, I think they're probably pretty happy about it as well. So,
Does this mean you all are now ready for growth?
I think we are all much more confident that we can do it now. And I think we've got a much better system of how we interact with each other and solve problems in meetings to solve anything that winds up being thrown at us as we move into the next phase of trying to boost business, because now we really have the ability to interact with each other in the right way and get the things that prior were just sort of problems ignored, we get them addressed and we get them solved and we move on to the next one. And we're just much more effective at how we plan and initiate things and execute the stuff that we're doing. And I'm pretty sure that if you asked anybody here, even people that were really, really, really doldrums about everything prior to all this, I think everyone would say that they've seen improvement in waste reduction and improved productivity and accountability and communication. I mean, those are all key things. And they all seem to be humming really well right now.
You're no longer disengaged.
No. In fact, I was so excited after the retreat because in seeing everything laid out, this is what we're going to do and this is how we're going to do it, I so much knew that if everybody does this, this is the fix. This will actually fix the stuff that was problematic up until now. Even things that didn't even seem like they were super related to each other. This particular problem, which if you trace its causes and things back, you realize that it's actually part of this problem right here. And so I came back from the retreat completely guns blazing, ready to go. Let's do this. And I think going back to the cheerleader thing, I think because so many people had seen that I had kind of checked out, I think when they knew what my mental state was prior to the process and knew how much I just said, you know what, I'm done. And then I came back and was fighting for it all again and energized about it. I think other people thought, okay, this might be something that we should take seriously, even though they had no idea even at that point what we had done or said or anything at the retreat. But they recognized that we came back, and me specifically, I came back just ready to go, ready to put this in place, because I knew every minute that we weren't working on it was just wasted time at that point to getting us to where we wanted to be, and at that point I knew we could get there.
Why is this not flavor of the month? It's been a couple months.
Yeah, I think it's not flavor of the month because I think we've seen a lot of push and interest, and we sit in meetings and there's moments where we remind each other in the meeting that, okay, this is the equilibrium that we're trying to reach with this system of doing things, and I feel it's wobbling off to the left. Let's get back on track. And there's been some really big things that we've dealt with that involved, even going to the owners and saying, we're leaning towards this decision, and here's why I think that maybe this isn't what we should do. And they're receptive. they listen, and there's a few cases where there's been some pretty big decisions just since we put this in place that I was really impressed and ecstatic that they were receptive and in the big picture actually totally took that feedback and totally altered course with what they were going to do. And it's what I thought needed to happen. And so I think we're not flavor of the week on this because I think everybody's comfortable with this. I think everybody really likes the fact that, you know, after they've been through the training and they recognize how it all works, I think they all realize the potential of this and how it's, I guess there's a lot of, it's not just sitting around and waiting for these people or these managers or these owners to fix all this for me. It's made people realize that they are all part of either the problem or solution, depending on what they choose to be. And I think it's helped align people towards this sort of common goal at the end. This what we're reaching for, which is fixing all these things that were problematic and knocking everybody's morale down. And so I think what I see really is people being hopeful again, and that, you know, again, had come to a dark time prior to going through this process.
Any final specific stories, examples of how it's played out?
You know, in a way, it's there's we use this so much, it's almost hard to pick out like any one particular event because it's become such a core of how our, you know, executive team meetings go. You know, we follow this meticulously. We slow down and go over things that we might have just glanced or glossed over before. It's just become so much of the everyday, especially with the team leaders, that I don't know. I find myself using it constantly, and I find myself making sure that I keep myself in check with the ground rules for, you know, how we interact, you know, with everybody, and at the same time keeping an eye on the big picture and watching for those wobbles and keeping everybody steering towards it. And so, you know, it really has become such a core part of how we make so many decisions that it's kind of hard to, you know, there's, in any given day, there's probably a few major things that happen that probably follow the course of what we trained on, and then there's probably a gazillion smaller scale things. And the way that we're approaching them is different than we would have before. Mm-hmm. And so, but I think the key to that is that even though a lot of this, you know, initially might have felt uncomfortable to people to be so, you know, open, honest, vulnerable in these meetings, it's actually done exactly what I hoped it would do, which is it's made us a more cohesive, tight, loyal group of people to each other, to making these decisions to keep the company moving the direction it needs to go to. But it's so all over the place as far as seeing it get implemented here and implemented there. And we sit in the team leader meetings and talk about different interactions we've had with people where we've, you know, seen something moving in a particular direction, and we sort of rein that in and keep everybody, you know, within the confines of where everyone needs to kind of stay, so that we all stay on course. And I think it's that accountability to each other that's helping with keeping the ship steering in the right direction. And I think everybody's doing a real good job of being accountable to themselves and to everybody else. And I think that's what's making us hum way much better as a team than we did before.
Fantastic. So thanks for sharing your story.
Sure.
And I mean this seriously, thanks for being a champion yourself of getting it, hearing what the principles were, and being committed to making it happen here. Mm-hmm. So kudos to you.
Yeah, well, thanks.
All right.
I can't thank you enough.